All righty, guys. Welcome back to the Identity Project. This time I have a very special guest, somebody that there's been several guests now that I quote unquote stalking on Instagram and bringing on the show. But as y'all all know, we love to share stories that inspire. So today I have a very special guest, Mr. Jeff McCann. What's going on, my man? How are you?
I'm well. And yourself?
I'm doing well. So Jeff, as we were talking about before this, obviously you are a dad. You have twins, right? So one boy, one girl. Is that right?
I do.
Got it. I myself, my wife and I was just telling you, we're expecting our first here any day. So I want to definitely dive into life as a dad. I also want to dive into, your life as a coach, and really everything that you do with athletes. And I'm sure we'll kind of pull it all together as we kind of dive into your story, but let's take it way, way, way back. Let's take it back to when you were the young athlete, elementary school. Let's start there and we'll kind of start going through kind of the timeline of your life.
Well, I guess, my journey as an athlete, yeah, you could say definitely began in elementary school. I had two parents that were very supportive of us, my brothers and I, being involved in sports. That was a big deal. So from a very early age, soccer, t-ball, football, basketball, they wanted us to have kind of this wide, spectrum of experience, and to try all of these different things. And I also, I grew up I was a little kid in the 80s and in the 90s before video games became very prevalent. So for my friends and I growing up, activity was everything. And we played basketball and we played baseball. We played tackle football in the backyard. And every day, this group of friends that I had in our neighborhood, that was what it was all about. And so elementary school recess was all about sports. And then free time was all really about sports. And as a kid growing up, I spent, my time watching TV was sports, so athletics were a big part of my growing up. And then, as I got into junior high and into high school, just really becoming part of school sport teams was a big part of my, development growing up. And so as a coach, I look at that, as something that I feel is so important for young people to be a part of. I have kids. I hope that my kids play team sports because the lessons that they learn through team sports will take them on into their professional lives, just like it has for me. But from a very early age, sports were a big deal. And it's been something that obviously, as I look at what I do as a career, that love for sport at an early age, it never left. It's only amplified.
Yeah, that's definitely a story that kind of resonates with me as well. I started playing sports, I don't know, since I was like 3 years old. And ever since I basically got a ball in my hand, whether it was basketball, football, baseball, whatever it was, I was all in on sports. And that was a big, big aspect of my life. One thing you touched on though was, kind of the lessons that are learned through playing team sports. I want to dive into that a little bit. What were some of the lessons that you learned, like as a child growing up? Because I think it's, maybe when we grow up, we don't necessarily know the lessons that we're learning. We more so, figure it out as we look back and reflect. So were there lessons that you learned kind of in the moment as you were growing up there, or was it more of something that you realize now as you're a coach?
That's a great question. I think it's a combination, really. I know that there's obviously those answers that you'd expect to hear, like teamwork and collaboration, stuff that if you're playing a team sport, like you're playing soccer or basketball or football, hockey, whatever it is, like you're accomplishing a goal with a group of people, and that's something that. When you look at the working world, I think that those are important skills that really have to transition over if you're going to be successful. I mean, obviously you could be in business or you could be in something where it's all on you, but more often than not, we're working in team aspects and team environments. I know that for me, when I look back, when I reflect upon my early years, I was never the best athlete. I was always able to keep up. But I felt like my work ethic was something that I really had to develop in regards to practice. And that's where I was able to try to bridge the gap possibly. And I feel like the intrinsic factors associated with me having to practice harder or work harder to keep up with my peers, I think that was something that ultimately, when I reflect upon it, is one of the contributors to me being successful where I'm at now, at least. And so that intrinsic factor of having to work and that, as I got higher, or as I moved further and further in my athletic career, and it came to being a college athlete, well, that's the weight room and the sports performance side of things, which, I mean, shoot, if you look at what I do as a career now, I mean, that's a direct correlation or result from that. So there's a lot of life lessons. I played football in high school for a guy named Bill Beatty, one of the someone who's had a tremendous impact on my life. And something that was always stressed with us was if you were not 5 minutes early, you were late. And so being punctual, sport teaches us discipline, teaches us punctuality. You got to have thick skin, in sport. You got to be able to accept constructive criticism from a coach. And so I look at those traits and those characteristics as being, I think, essential for success, because people are going to criticize you. Your boss is going to tell you that you need to do something better or improve upon some aspect of your job. And if you don't have the ability to see where that constructive criticism is coming and have a little bit of thick skin, well, I mean, you're not going to accomplish a lot. And so I think that's another important lesson that sport teaches us, in team sports too.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It kind of makes me laugh as I reflect back. Did you struggle with any of that, like growing up? Like, did you struggle with, like not getting along with people on your team, or like, what were some of the struggles that you had growing up that, you see maybe as like, I don't know, character flaws now?
That's that's something I have to really think about here. Well, I think that in any situation, when you're dealing with different people, you're gonna have conflict, right? And then you put into the equation the fact that you're kids, right? And you gotta find a way to get along in order to play the game. And so, yeah, I think that when I look back on it now, I'm sure I had issues with like teammates and stuff, but I mean, that's being an adolescent, that's being a little kid, not knowing who you really were at that point. And then, you get into high school and you get on these teams and you're with all types of different people from all different backgrounds. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about sport is it puts people from different backgrounds and who have different beliefs and different experiences, and it puts them together in an environment where they have to succeed together. And I think that is something that when I look back upon those years, yeah, absolutely. You have to learn like almost like informal conflict resolution on the spot, like you might be getting into it with a teammate on the basketball court. Well, hey, we got to squash this right now because here comes the offense, we got to play D together. Let's go. I think that is something that is invaluable because there's going to be conflict. There's going to be issues in the workforce or in the workplace, and you have to be able to think on the fly, put things behind you. It's not a big deal. If it is, obviously we need to talk about it later on, but we can't talk about it right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think so. I think that's probably commonplace for a lot of people, in sport.
Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, it's so funny as I was just thinking about it, because for me, as an entrepreneur now, a lot of people ask, they're like, did you have trouble with like people telling you what to do growing up? And I never ever thought of that until then. And as I started reflecting back, I was like, man, like they're right. Like I always had a problem. Like I was always, whether it was like getting in fights in football or basketball or baseball, like whatever sport it was, or whether it was like different jobs that I worked for, I just always had this, like, it's not necessarily that I didn't have respect. Like I definitely had a respect, but at the same time, like I always wanted to do it my own way for whatever reason. And so that was something I really struggled with. And so I don't know, that's just a thought that came to my mind kind of from the entrepreneurial realm. But as we dive back into your story, so how did you know, or like at what point, obviously you played college, was it college football? Is that right? Okay. So as you're going to school, like, did you know in that moment that you wanted to go into like the sports performance realm or be a teacher? Like, did you do like kinesiology, or what did you dive into in terms of studies?
Yeah, no, for me, I pretty much from the age of 15, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I had a really good football coach who was also a teacher of mine, and I thought, I'm growing up in a small town in Washington. I'm looking at this guy right here in his life, and I'm like, man, that's exactly what I want. And so from 15 on, I pretty much always had this direction of being a football coach and being a teacher. And so when it came to selecting my studies in college, I went with history and social studies because I knew that I eventually wanted to be a social studies teacher. And so for me, the kinesiology side of things, that's been post-grad. So I got into my I got my first teaching job pretty much out of college, and I was teaching and coaching from there.
Got it. Okay.
15 is when I really kind of made that decision, like this is the direction that I wanted to go.
Wow. So. That's actually crazy to think about. I mean, 15 years old, like that's a young age. I think most people would probably consider that as like a young age to know what you kind of want to go all in on. I mean, I remember me like going into college my first year, and I'm like, God, I got to pick a degree. Like, I don't even know, like, I don't know where to go with this. So that's pretty cool, man. So how did you, once you graduated school, like, and you started being a teacher, you started coaching, like at what moment did you start going down kind of this rabbit hole of sports performance? Because I mean, as I know, and I mean, I'm curious to kind of dive more into your background, but sports performance, I mean, outside of like just high school sports, like, I mean, you can go super, super deep into, a lot of these different realms. So how did that all happen? How did like who or what sparked your interest?
So, okay, well, as I said before, I got that first teaching and coaching job, and I was at a private school in the San Fernando Valley, and did my very first year, had an amazing time, had so much fun doing it. It's exactly what I've always wanted what I imagined it would be. And at the end of the season, the coach was fired. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, what do I do now? The head coach is fired, and though it's not the same in regards to the pros or the college for the most part, here in Southern California, it's extremely competitive. Probably like in Texas, you could say there's some parallels. But, the head coach gets fired, pretty much the whole staff gets cleaned out. Well, I stayed on and I ran the weight room for the football program in the interim time where there was no head coach. So if you imagine the head coach getting fired in, like, say, December, they still hadn't hired a head coach until May. So I had about 4 or 5 months where I was really running the program. I fell back onto what I was doing as a collegiate athlete in the years prior to, in regards to what the weight room program was going to look like. I got to college. I was a 155-pound wide receiver, and in 2 years of hitting the weight room and eating as much as I wanted to, I put on about 80 pounds. And I went from not really being a part of the weight room program or really liking it in high school to completely embracing it in college. As I said before, that work ethic, I had to find a way to try to bridge the gap. And so for me, I did it through the weight room and through working out, and just kind of became a student of sports performance at that point. Now, we were still in that bigger, faster, stronger program, if you will, which, there might be some coach out there listening right now, or somebody saying, oh, I still do that. Okay, well, we were in the early 2000s, that was outdated, right? The 4 sets of 10, 4 sets of 8, 5 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3, let's max every month. You know what I mean? So I started with that, and then I kind of began to look at what were other approaches to sports performance, realizing that maybe I was limited in what I was falling back on, what knowledge I had. My brother was playing at a local junior college, playing football, and the strength and conditioning coach is a legend, Robert Dos Remedios. And I just began to pick his brain and learn as much as I could, either from my brother or from job shadowing, or just, kind of getting an idea what the program was. And he's put out several books, which I totally recommend. And then I kind of began to fuse my style with what I saw him do because I loved it. And then taking bits and pieces from other strength coaches. And it really, the whole decade of the 2000s, I was just trying to absorb as much information as I could. Not that I don't still now, but as I was trying to formulate my own program.
That's amazing. So going back to, like Perform Better seminars, I don't know if you ever attended those. But yeah, I saw him speak there at one of those seminars. I think we were in California, actually, maybe in like Long Beach. So yeah, a lot of those names are sparking some memories there.
Yeah, his approach to sports performance was just radically different than what anyone else was doing. And so, when I look at what I do now, a lot of the core principles come from Dos Remedios. And I look at where I am as a coach, and there's so many different people that have had such a positive impact on me, both directly and indirectly. And, when it comes to the actual programming side of things, I would say Dos Remedios is probably like the guy that really kind of set me on my course. And then obviously there's people in coaching that I've come across that I've worked with or worked for that have had an impact on me and shaped who I am as a coach. Because, you could be phenomenal with the X's and O's, if you will. You know what I mean? You can be, very gifted when it comes to telling somebody all of the different parts of the body and all these, but if you can't deliver the message and communicate the message to the athlete, then you're missing out. It's like a teacher. You could be, somebody with a PhD in rocket science, and you get to a classroom and you can't manage a classroom, and it's just anarchy, and your message never gets across. So I think that as much as I've been able to learn the science and everything, I've also had some really amazing people help me with delivering the message and being somebody that can coach guys up.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that's super powerful. I mean, the number of mentors that have kind of shaped me into who I am today, I mean, I owe them all the credit in the world. Talk a little bit for me on kind of mentorship, and obviously you've had people in your life, like you said, that have kind of impacted you, and then you as a coach. I mean, I know you're out there impacting tons of young lives. So, what, in terms of just mentorship, like why do you believe in it, and what has it done for you?
Well, I think if we go back to that story of why I chose to be a teacher and coach, I had somebody that was very impactful on my life at age 15, where I was like, okay, this is the direction I want to go. And I've actually I've been fortunate to have had kids come to me and say, hey, I'm a teacher and a coach now because of you. And that means the world to me, because I know that, Todd McDougall, who shaped me and put and sent me on this trajectory, if you will, I owe him so much. That to have somebody come up to me and tell me the same thing means the world to me. I think that, when we look at what are the roles of coaches, we are mentors. We're dealing with people who are in a part of their journey in their life where they need that. We need positive influences that help nurture our strengths and help us fix and or remedy our deficiencies. And so I think that what I do, I think it's very important because I'm dealing with these young men who are in this stage of their life where, they're going to go out and accomplish great things. A lot of them are going to go out and do great things, and having like coaches, not just like myself, but others that are positive impacts on their life. Well, that's going to send them in the right direction, I think, and help in their growth.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say, because the majority of the athletes you work with they're high school athletes, or in the performance realm, are you working with like collegiate athletes as well?
Yes. Well, for me, I wear two hats in regards to sports performance. I'm the strength coach at Westlake High School, where I have our football program, basketball program, lacrosse program. I balance that with teaching social studies. But then I have my business, and I have professional, college, and high school athletes. Because obviously college kids go off to school and, the pros are off with their organizations. When I quantify it, I probably spend the majority of my time with local high school athletes. not just from my school, but there are quite a few schools in my area that I work with, their kids. And when I get my college guys, it's because when they're back for spring break or when back for the winter or summer, and then my pros in their off season. But the majority of my time is spent with my high school guys.
Got it. Got it. And so I know you work with or you specialize with quarterbacks. In terms of like the high school athletes though, you work with all types of sports, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's seasonal. I know that when we hit, late July and August, even the most dedicated football players, they're not thinking about coming in to get extra work for the most part. They're trying to survive Hell Week or our notion of 2-a-days now and stuff like that. Their mindset has shifted. And at that point, I start usually picking up a couple of basketball people, a couple of clients that are golfers, baseball guys at that point. But I would say that from December till July, I'm pretty much all football. I do, like you said, I train quarterbacks. That is, and not on the field. I do it specifically in the context of the weight room and sports performance side of things. But yeah, I've got groups of linemen that come and train with me, and receivers and stuff like that. So I'm kind of all over the board in the realm of football, at least. Got
it. Okay, that makes more sense. Man, that's awesome. So I think back and I don't know if this resonates with you or not, but when I played, so we actually had like a powerlifting program at our high school. I don't know if y'all have powerlifting out there. Y'all do?
Well, not like on the scope of Texas though, the scale of Texas. We understand that Texas, even out here in California, we understand that Texas is a whole nother animal. You know what I mean? We have a lot of respect for Texas out here.
Well, it's Texas, California, and Florida, right? Those are kind of like the powerhouses. But man, I think back to my high school, and it was a 5A school. When I finished, it was 4A. But we had, football was a big deal for sure, but our powerlifting team was a really big deal as well. And I always think back, I got a college scholarship to play football. Like I was a decent athlete, but I was never like you said, I was never like the specialist. I was never like the best on the team or anything like that. But what I was like the best, like in the weight room, like pound for pound in the weight room. Like I loved the weight room. And I think that's why it made such an impact in my life and kind of made me go down this career path, was just simply because that was something I really, really excelled at, whether it was just in the weight room or the powerlifting or just the work ethic side of, the off season. And I know I got a lot of that from my dad, obviously coaches as well, but how much of a impact did your parents play in the work ethic that you had?
My dad is my hero, my role model. I'm blessed to have two parents that I love and respect tremendously. But my father had the work ethic that, if somebody told me that I was like my dad, if someone told me I was like Mike McCann, that'd be the ultimate compliment. He's somebody that was able to, he worked, he traveled quite a bit, but when he was home, he was all dad, took us fishing. He played sports with us. I think our love for sport really came from him. My mom loved sports too, and was always encouraging and everything. But, to have the dad that could, we're out there playing basketball with our friends and our dad's, 40, 50 feet away in work boots, mowing the lawns. Give me that basketball. And he just, starts stroking 3-pointers. We just, wow. It was everything to us. He also worked out for a long time. And so I had that as a model. Here's a guy in his 40s and 50s that's going to the gym and working out. And that was always something that I looked at and, okay, well, I need to do that too. I was a multi-sport athlete in high school. And so I didn't spend as much time in the weight room. Really, I just wasn't about the weight room. And then when I got to college, then it's like, you don't have a choice. This is what you have to do. And I just embraced it all fully at that point. And then I became a power lifter, and I became, as I said before, kind of a student of sports performance, reading about it, learning about it. And so I would have loved to have had a powerlifting team, to have been a part of that. I would have loved that. And I think that, we don't have it out here in this area, but I know that if we did, there would be a lot of interest in it. and stuff. So maybe that's something where we go that way in the future. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it, man. It was kind of crazy. We had somebody in every single weight class qualify for state all 4 years.
That's huge.
It was, it was a time in my life. Well, it's kind of crazy because I competed in CrossFit after high school and college and things like that. But I was never ever as strong as I was when I did powerlifting. I mean, I competed in the 181-pound class. And at state, I back squatted 600 pounds, and had some good numbers in bench and deadlift too, but the back squat was really the impressive one.
Absolutely.
But yeah, man, you think to yourself, you're like, man, that was the strongest I have ever been. I will never squat 600 pounds in my life again. And I'm okay with that. But yeah, it was a really cool, I mean, it was just like football, right? Like it was that brotherly love. It was just kind of a little bit more tighter niche, much smaller team, if you will. So. So dude, I want to dive into kind of like what you do now. So obviously you work with a lot of high school athletes. What are some of like the biggest, issues that you see with young athletes, in the weight room specifically from the strength and performance perspective?
When you say issues, like problems or
so like if like maybe we're talking, I don't know, like different lifts and things like that. So maybe like the 3 lifts that you see the most issues with, like squatting or deadlifting or whatever.
Oh yeah, no, I think that when I'm looking at my team as opposed to looking at like private clients, I know that, with my team, there are things that I hang my hat on, like, hey, we need to be good at this. We will be good at Olympic lifting. We are going to power clean and we're going to hang clean. I've gone back and forth with the squat, front squat, back squat. What do I really want to do with my guys? I feel like with where we're at now, probably we're going to transition this off season or this season into front squatting more, so that we're better cleaners. We lost a lot of size. We graduated a lot of guys, so that way we're going to be able to make up for that, in my opinion, and through our cleans. And obviously, the front squat will be a supporting lift to that. When it comes to my private clients, it's hit or miss. Like, I've got some really talented kids that come and work with me. I've got some kids that are, just they're freshmen in high school, and they're still growing, and so it's kind of all over the map, if you will. I wouldn't say that there are things that I'm just like, oh man, this is across the board universally, we're all bad at this, or we all need to improve upon this. It really is subjective. It really is different based on who's coming in. I've got a wide receiver who's 6'7". He's the number 1 wide receiver in the nation right now for the 2020 class. Well, I mean, his needs and his demands and his deficiencies and his strengths are way different than, the junior college lineman that I'm training or the freshman quarterback. So across the board, these guys all have different things that they're dealing with. I will say that if I had to pick something, core strength. I feel like that a lot of these kids, that's what they're lacking. And how are we ever going to maximize the strength of the arms and the legs and have them work in conjunction with one another if there isn't that core strength? So I start every single private workout with core and a core component to things. It is every time I have some form of active recovery, they're always doing something with core. So that way we're helping to bridge that gap and fix that deficiency, if you will.
Yeah.
I wish I had a better answer for you. It's really kind of all over the board with where I'm at.
No, I mean, to be honest with you, I love that answer. I don't know how much you know about us, but like with iCoach Nutrition, that lowercase I, that's what it stands for, right? Individualization, right? Every single person's different. And, I think obviously the kids that get to work with you one-on-one, like that's what it enables you to do, right? It enables you from the assessment toward, throughout the whole entire process to be able to make it individual to them. So I love that. I guess I was kind of referencing more in like the group settings. Like maybe if we said, hey, football athletes, right? Like the most common injuries that you see, and maybe this is because of X, Y, Z, and then dive into the volleyball sector, things like that.
Well, I think that if we look at where football is now in this current context, well, besides the word concussion, which, you know, we hear quite often, I would say knee ligament injuries. That's something that as a high school teacher, I walk a campus where I will see dozens of kids in some form of brace, on crutches, in some way, shape, or form. Their movement is inhibited by some form of sport-related injury. And I've taught at several different high schools now, so I can't say that, or I can say that it's not just just one school. I see it across the board. So, you know, when we look at knee ligament injuries, well, I've been able to keep quite a bit of data from the years that I started at one of the local high schools in 2010 to where I'm at now in the off season of 2019. And what I've done is I've tracked the kids throughout the years who have missed games due to knee ligament injuries. And so, and I've been able to kind of compare that with my friends that are coaches, or if there's published data from other institutions, other schools, or from ATCs. I've done a lot of research in this. So for me, I look at what my program's trying to accomplish. It's trying to, obviously you can't get rid of the injury altogether. You know what I mean? Like there's those act of God injuries where someone's gonna get rolled up on, and no matter what their training background, no matter what their development and experience, that knee's gonna go. But more often than not, what are ACLs? Well, they're non-contact injuries. And so the body's ability to decelerate properly, to me, is the determining factor, and whether or not that goes from a simple breakdown, make a tackle, to I'm going to break down and my knee's going to valgus collapse and buckle, and there goes my MCL, ACL. So trying to build programming that adheres to certain principles, which I feel will help limit the likelihood of those injuries occurring. So with me, I look at the hamstrings. I think that the ACL's functionality has to do with the hamstrings. So we do so much hamstrings. It's probably a 3-to-1 hip dominant to knee dominant movement with my programming. I do a lot of single leg plyos. So that way the body learns how to decelerate properly on one leg. And we will do a lot of hip mobility work through not only our warm up, but also as an active recovery. So if you're in my program and you're squatting, well, as soon as you rack that 8th rep of a squat, for instance, you're going to then immediately go through 12 track hurdles where you're going to go through a set pattern. And then we'll find, once you've gone through that, some form of maybe 10-second static stretch of some different muscle group, and then you go right back into squatting. So to me, building a program where active recovery is as much injury prevention as it is anything else. You know, instead of going over there and getting a drink of water and shooting the breeze with my buddy, I'm looking at 2 different injury prevention strategies or methodologies being implemented while I'm taking a breather between my sets of squats, if you will.
Wow.
So trying to build a program that's unilateral based, and then once we get closer and closer in the training calendar to football season, then we stop doing bilateral movements for the most part. We go exclusively unilateral, and then we do a lot of stuff barefoot. So that's how I kind of approach that. Because as I said, well, I guess going back to the question, what are the things that we're hearing about the most, I think, in football, or just in sport in general, are knee ligament injuries. So how do we learn how to fix those, or how do we learn how to train in a way that helps reduce the likelihood?
I love that, man. I think that's I think that's a huge takeaway, especially for coaches out here listening to this. Like, I mean, you know, I think back to what we did in our football weight room, and it was exactly what you just said. It was, you know, I'd hit a set, I'd go talk to whoever, I'd get a water, whatever. And I also think back to the fact that, like, I didn't even know what like a foam roller was back then, you know?
Oh, right. Absolutely.
So can you talk a little bit on, you know, and this will be kind of more for maybe like parents out there listening. Can you discuss a little bit more on, like, what are your tips for the parents out there that they need to get their kids doing outside of like sport and weight room? Like, so like sleep, nutrition, those types of things.
I mean, there's so much that I would want to say with that. You know, I think that I think that in today's day and age, we needed to let kids be kids as well. You know, I've got a lot of parents, and I appreciate their business. I'm not. That's the last thing I would want to say is that I don't want them to come to me. I do, but you know, there's a lot of parents that are pushing sports on kids. Out here, we're baseball. Baseball is king in this area. We put out a lot of amateur baseball talent from the San Fernando Valley and Southern California in general. And so letting those kids play other sports, you know what I mean? You don't need 10-year-old Johnny, you know, practicing his curveball and everything else at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. You know what I mean? Like, and there are parents like that. But yeah, like you were saying, going into the element of nutrition and sleep and rest and giving the body the ability to recover, and not go from basketball practice to baseball training to weightlifting with your coach to speed training, giving them an opportunity to be kids, you know, because for me, I never was burnt out with sports because I always had a break. It seemed like there was always some form of, you know, hey, it's baseball season this time of year. It's soccer season this time of year. It's football season this time of year. And so I always had the ability to, you know, look forward to that and be able to participate with the belief that, you know, this is fun and I am enjoying this, and not like, oh God, here we go again. I got to go to this and got to go do that. So yeah. I think that's a big deal, you know, is not burning our kids out. You know, I had a few years ago this client who's was a baseball kid, and he was a good baseball player. He was a high school baseball player, but I think the dad saw pros when, let's be honest, this kid would probably go and just play college baseball at like a small school maybe, or just be a good high school player and get the experience of just playing high school baseball. But the dad saw something, and I mean, it seemed like right before the kid's senior year, the kid just fell apart. You know what I mean? Like this was supposed to be the season, but going to hitting coaches 4 days a week and strength coaches 4 days a week and speed coaches, and the kid just said, "Hey, I'm done," and decided never to play baseball.
Dude, that's literally like basically what happened to me. Baseball was my sport my whole entire life. That was the first sport I ever played. And as it started getting more and more serious, you know, basically as I started getting into middle school and high school, like I finally quit my sophomore year and I completely stopped playing baseball and focused 100% on like football and powerlifting and track. And it was all because I was playing literally like 160 games a year. And I got completely burnt out.
Yeah, that happens. And I mean, like you're saying, it happened to you. And it's something like out here, we have so much baseball talent that, you know, I see it all over the place, you know, down here. And I just hope that parents give these kids an opportunity to kind of be kids and do other things. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, give that arm a rest. You know, that kid's arm's ready to fall off. Let him go play soccer, you know, let him go run track. Let him get away from that for a little while.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I love that you said that. And, you know, out of all the directions I'm sure we could have gone with that, like, I love that that's what you say first, because you're right. I mean, I see it all the time. Like I see it happen with so many different, you know, whether it was athletes that I was working with or just other parents, what they're doing with their kids. And, you know, we want the best for our kids and all of these things. But I do think it's a great reminder, especially for me as I'm coming into being a dad, that like, you know, I never want to push things on my kids. Like I want them to just fall in love, whatever they fall in love with, and do whatever brings them, you know, fulfillment in life. So, man, I think that's a big takeaway for those parents out there. You know, look at yourself in the mirror and, you know, just have that honest conversation with yourself. Make sure you're not pushing too hard.
Yeah. What's the end goal? You know what I mean? Like I think about it too, in the context of being a parent, and, you know, I've got a boy and a girl, and I hope that they play sports, not because I want them to get a college scholarship. That'd be great, right? Like who wouldn't want by the time our kids are going to be in college? I mean, imagine how much that's going to cost. But, you know, I just hope that they have good experiences. I hope that they play sports for those lessons that we talked about, but also to make friends. You know, I'm in a fantasy football league with like 8 of my high school football buddies, and we're all 38 years old, and we graduated high school 20 years ago. Yet we find these ways to stay connected and to be close to one another. And if I had never played football, I would never been, part of those guys' lives and their, my life as well. I hope that, my children play sports so that way they have, that ability to, always be working towards something, but always be able to manage. It's not like they just manage their time. It's not like they just get done with school and they just come home and they sit on the couch for hours on end. I want them to be able to learn how to manage, how to be a student and be an athlete. Go to practice, have a game, have math homework. That you need to learn those skills, because when you get into the real world, that's what we do. You know what I mean? I work, I come home, I do the dishes, I do chores, I do invoices for my business. It's something that's my career, that's my job. But I learned how to budget time and how to manage have those managing skills when being a student athlete. And I hope that, that's what my kids get out of it. In the context of football, I hope my son plays football, and I don't care if he's good or not. I hope my son plays football because, and not to say that not other sports are tough. Like, I've trained Division I girl swimmers. Those girls were the toughest athletes I've ever been around. Those were girls who were swimming in the morning, then coming into the weight room, then going to school full time, then swimming in the afternoon. And I've trained wrestlers and ultimate fighters. I've got a lot of respect for all those sports. I hope my son plays football because I think of all of the lessons that football teaches you, which we've talked about, but there's these elements of football that you can't get anywhere else. Imagine conquering fear. Like you're getting ready to return a kickoff, and that there's 11 guys that are going to try to take your head off, and you're wearing pads, and it might hurt, but you're going to get back up. But just knowing that they're conquering those fears, going across the middle. You know what I mean? Or being a quarterback and just having that blind trust that your left tackle is blocking for you and you do your job and you might just get annihilated. But but conquering our fear, I think, is a big thing that I feel like football teaches you, where you might not get that in other sports. Granted, hey, if I'm facing a 100-mile-an-hour slider, I'm going to be scared to death. So I can't, again, you can't just say it's only in football that you get that. I'm just speaking from what I know, and I just hope that my boy plays it so that way he gets to be a part of a team, and you look at football specifically. I can't think of another sport out there where you can have the number one player in the nation on your team, but if the other 10 guys aren't on the same page, that team isn't going to go. I watched my high school basketball team lose the state championship. I was a fan. I wasn't on the team. I watched my high school basketball team lose the state championship to Jamal Crawford. Literally one dude beat our team. He just sat back and shot three-pointers, and they just got rebounds and kicked it out to him. But you can have the number one player in the nation on a football team, and if the other 10 guys aren't working with him together, that doesn't matter. You're not going to achieve anything. You're not going to have success. And so I love that about football. And you think about like offensive line, you got 5 guys working together to achieve a goal. You know what I mean? Like, there's no other selfless position in sport like an offensive lineman. Without them, nothing happens. You know what I mean? But they don't get any of the glory when good things or when teams accomplish good things. You know what I mean? Rarely does anyone say, well, it's all about our offensive line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I completely agree. You made a lot of good points there. I think, like, wrapping it all up, it's just like, what sports do for us. And I never would have known this, maybe in the moment growing up, but they've really taught me how to overcome adversity. And, I think in sports, like, that's what it is. Like, there's a lot of adversity that you have to overcome, whether it's in a single game or whether it's, just trying to manage school and sports or whatever, throughout different seasons of life, whatever it is, it just teaches you to kind of be more resilient and overcome the hard stuff. So, Jeff, dude, I could probably talk to you all day, man. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, but I do want to respect your time. But where can everybody find you at? Obviously, social media, for those of you that are in California, maybe locally. But yeah, man, where can everybody find you?
Well, I'm in the process of creating a website right now, but it would be along the lines of McCann Sports Performance. But you can find me on social media right now through Instagram, McCann Sports Performance, and at Twitter at Jeff McCann. And so I use, as we talked about kind of in the pre-interview, just social media being such a big deal nowadays in regards to marketing and getting messages across and everything. So that's primarily the modality in which I can be reached at.
I love it, man. Yeah, Instagram's kind of where it's at right now. I think most people would agree with that. Jeff, so what are you last question here, my man. What are you most excited for obviously we're right here into the new year. So what are you most excited for 2019?
Wow. Well, for me, business wise, it's year 2 of my business, McCann Sports Performance. And so I'm excited to see where that goes. I am excited to see where my team is going to go this year. As I said before, we graduated a lot of really, we had, like, if you're in Texas, we had DeGabriel Floyd, one of the top linebackers in the nation. He's now at Texas as an early enrollee. We lost a lot of guys, so it'll be really interesting to see where this team goes. A bunch of great kids working really hard together. So I'm excited to see what happens with that. And then, just being a dad, I'm excited to see where, my kids are in their 3rd year of life and where they're at right now in their growth and development. It's amazing to see. And so I'm excited to see what the year brings in that as well.
I love that, man. Jeff, I love your passion. I love what you're all about. Dude, thank you so much for taking the time, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much for having me, and congratulations on being an expecting father.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.